Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for choosing Across the Fence. I'm Will Michael in this afternoon for Judy Simpson. It is the fourth Wednesday of the month, which means it's time for our Bird Notes program. And joining us, as always, is Mark LaBarr, conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont. 2 months in a row I get to be with you.
That's right. This is great. It's always nice to be chatting with you across the table, Will.
Well, it's always great to have you with us. You do such great work. And now it's spring, we think, sort of, maybe.
Sort of.
And there's a lot that happens in the bird world in particular come springtime.
Yes, and of course there are a lot of things coming.
Yep.
And there should be some things going, but WCAX, I found out, had its own little taste of the snowy owl explosion that kind of happened, the eruption of snowy owls. This is a great shot by, I believe, WCAX's own Joe Carroll.
That's correct, yep.
And the reason that I like this shot is when you see an owl, oftentimes you don't realize how large their gape actually is, and so this is a great shot of that snowy, giving us a little face, I guess one would say. But right here was right out in the front lawn, wasn't it?
It was a nice visitor and quite a surprise. Joe was out, other folks were looking at it, and as typically happens, then it was gone.
And then it was gone. And if you looked at the background, it was green.
Yes.
So, here's a snowy owl without snow.
Well, one irony, of course, our regular viewers will remember we started the birding season, the winter birding season, and you were talking about this being eruptive. There's been a lot of coverage.
Yes.
So here we are doing this November, and now we're doing it again in April.
Yeah, so this is probably the last stragglers of birds that are here.
Yeah.
It was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
There might be some around, but they're slowly taking their leave and moving back north.
Yeah. And you make a good point about the photography that Joe got showing the gaping mouth.
Yeah.
We know mice. What else would the snowy owl in terms of being here and having good meals? What are they after?
It's probably a lot of that, a lot of voles and mice and stuff like that, and meadow voles. But I wouldn't put it past if you had a rabbit that was running around or something larger fare. Great horns will oftentimes take that. Up north, obviously, they eat a lot of lemmings, and so, and they eat things, they don't chew them. They just go straight down.
Well, we're going to come back to some owl stuff, giving our viewers a bit of a preview. But we're going to stay current right for now in terms of the spring. There's lots of bluebird questions out there. A better year for bluebirds than normal, or what's going on?
Well, this is kind of like the annual bluebird show that we do. I try to do this every other year, just to give everybody a little taste of, the basics. We get a lot of questions at the center. Our bluebirds are back, or, even questions where people say our bluebirds have stuck around all winter. And so we talk, a lot of those kind of revolve around putting up nest boxes, when you should do that, when you should clean them. And so I'd like to take a little time each spring to kind of discuss that. This is a male bluebird, classic kind of pose. They're a great sight because they're so blue and they're that
just
vibrant
fantastic.
chest.
Yep.
And of course, we know that they are birds that are cavity nesters. Natural in nature, they'll nest in cavities, and use that as their place to lay eggs and do the incubation and raise their young. But oftentimes, it's been a very successful thing for humans to put up nest boxes for them.
How big would that natural cavity be, Mark, roughly? Because that's a piece that we don't get to see. We will see animals entering, birds going in and out, but you're talking about nesting, and you're kind of thinking it's a home, and I just wondered if you had a sense of how big it is.
It varies, and when we talk about nest boxes, oftentimes nest boxes are about 5 inches down from the hole. But I've been, read some things where some nest boxes are a little bit smaller, size-wise, and a little bit shallower. Oftentimes it may be just what the bird can actually find to accommodate some young, but probably not all that deep, and enough for them to get in and out and get the young out.
Now, is this an official Audubon Bluebird box that our director Ryan Wilson was showing us?
It's a Bluebird box. I don't know if it's an official Audubon one, but it has all of the classic features of a Bluebird box. I brought one in so we can look at one up close.
Well, that's neat because you're showing us the natural cavity that we saw. There it is on the tree, and we can talk about height and maintenance. But go ahead and bring that up because you did bring in this today, and we were talking about it before we got started.
So this is the kind of the classic Bluebird box. You know, it is a box. It has a roof on it. There are some key features to this. There are a number of different designs that are out there, but this is the one that you probably see most often as you're driving around. It is the hole size is about 1.5 inches. And that's the size that bluebirds like. You get anything bigger than that, and you start to attract other birds.
And there is a reason, and I know you've told us this before, there is a reason why there is this piece at the entrance as opposed to just the hole.
Right. Well, this is a predator guard. And it basically keeps things like raccoons from being able to get their arm in there, or leg in there, I guess I would say, and bend and actually access the young. It's just,
so that's one of the key features. You have some others that you wanted to go over.
Yeah, some of the other ones too is ventilation. You know, this box oftentimes where bluebirds like to nest is out in fields, so they're often exposed to sun and things of that nature. So you want to be able to, you can see here right at the top, there's kind of a thin opening that will allow air to circulate. If you look at the bottom of the box, you can see in the corners here, there are 4 little holes. Again, this allows air to circulate through.
I'm just going to turn this maybe a little bit,
And that just allows air to circulate through
there. So that has it in all 4 corners. And again, that was also up top, okay?
And that just allows, you know, again, it can get hot in there. One of the other features which is important is being able to clean your box. Sometimes boxes have doors on the side. This one here opens from the bottom. It allows you at the end of, or at the beginning of each spring or at the end of each fall to get in there and clean that, that box out. You can see that this is a pretty standard box. The depth is about 5 to 6 inches from the hole down to the bottom. But you want to clean that out because after, sometimes there can be, parasites that are in there, and, we often find wasp nests in some of them that weren't used by birds the previous year. So it's always good this time of year or even earlier to get out and clean those boxes out. One other thing I wanted to point out on the inside here too, which is really important. You can see here I have taken basically a screwdriver and I've marked up the front of the inside of the box right below the hole. And this basically enables young birds to be able to get their,
developing,
to be able to climb up to that hole to actually be able to leave the box. If this is left as a smooth surface, sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes folks will put hardware cloth in here, so it gives them something to grip on. And but that's a key point to make sure your box has
and they'll
something
be ready.
in there.
Those youngins will be ready to take flight roughly how soon?
You're looking at probably 12 to 14 days in there. Bluebirds are in with the robins and other thrushes. They start early. So the bluebird boxes, I actually heard something on the listserv that there was one bluebird that had been returned. This was, again, a week or 2 ago, and I had already had 3 eggs in the nest. So they get back and they start fairly early, and we'll often have, sometimes we'll have 2 broods during the summer.
And in terms of, these are things you can build yourself. There's often designs and information on the internet. I also know that scouting groups and others will have projects. So there's plenty of opportunities for our viewers to go find something, and you don't always have to spend a ton of money in this case.
No, this box was actually a kit that my dad made, and it was pretty easy to assemble and get together, and they work great. They have a couple of holes for mounting your box.
Which is jumping in because one of the questions, and I don't know the answer to, is so we've got it, we've built it, we've got the features. How high up is it?
About 5 feet is what you want.
Okay.
You know, you want to be able to get in there and clean the box.
Yep.
So 5 feet is good, and you want to have the box oriented. You don't want to have the box oriented to the northwest or west, because a lot of the spring weather comes from that direction.
Just rip right through there.
So
Okay.
you want to have it turned so it's not exposed that way. These can be mounted on wooden posts. They can also be mounted using a flange on the bottom and then attached to a metal pole. Sometimes that metal pole is better because, again, you can grease it, or you can keep predators from climbing
Well, I was going
up
to say,
it.
the combination of the height and where you choose to put it has a lot to do with
Correct.
The accessibility and the number of predators that are around.
Right. And, you know, bluebirds, as I mentioned earlier, like open fields, meadows. If you have, you know, a singing perch close by, telephone wires that they can perch on and sing from. But, you know, much of what we find in the Champlain Valley and in large parts of Vermont are great places for bluebirds.
And one of the things that is cool to me is that the bluebirds aren't the only birds that will, if you build it, they will come.
Right. So
what else is?
There's a lot of different species that will use it depending on where you put it. Tree swallows will often use it if you have it in that location that I just described for bluebirds. If you move it back towards the woods, or you move it and tuck it, you know, where there's the shrub growth comes out, then you're going to probably get other birds like black-capped chickadees would be another species that would use that. And then house wrens are another species that will use it. Again, you know, you'd have to set that in areas that are a little closer to forest or denser vegetation.
Well, I also find that those 3 species that you're talking about, they can show up in a lot of places.
They do, yes.
Bothersome to some, and there are some that don't cause as many problems as those 3 species you just highlighted.
Well, we have a house wren, and they can sing a lot. Let's just say, and
and swallows in and out.
Swallows in and out, but you know they eat insects, so swallows are good to have. And unfortunately,
I didn't mean to suggest they weren't, but in terms of the houses, there are some that cause a few fewer problems.
Yes.
And those include.
Well, the 2 ones that unfortunately also take advantage of these houses, which are introduced species, are the house sparrow, which is a bird that was also known as the English sparrow. And this can be a very aggressive bird and will oftentimes kill other birds that are even incubating or break eggs in the nest boxes.
Right.
So sometimes if you set up a nest box in an area like around a barn or something like that, your chances of attracting some of those other species are going to be tough, because this little guy is going to get in there first. And then the other one that is an introduced species is the starling. And this is another bird that'll use boxes. It's a little bit bigger. So again, that hole size is really important as far as keeping starlings out. But those 2 are the 2 competitors that really you know, can take up space in the bluebird box world.
We're running a little bit short of time. I'm talking too much here, so just quickly, some other nest box types that you brought some images for us to understand?
Well, what I did bring was some other images of other things using the, I believe we have a couple other species which you might not necessarily look at as nest boxes.
We previewed it because we talked about owls earlier.
We did.
Okay.
So here's so here's the nest box. This is a eastern screech owl, and you can see the hole is considerably bigger, and the box is a little bit longer there. So again, another cavity nester, and then one nester that we would see out. You know, the screech owls you'd find in the woods. The American kestrel would
Just
be one
beautiful.
that you would see out, and oftentimes again out in fields. You can put up and set up kestrel boxes on the sides of barns. And I even got an email from somebody who noticed them on the back sides of some of the road signs on Route 89. So the state has put them up there because you have that open habitat. Kestrels are a small falcon, and they feed and hunt over fields.
We have time for at least one viewer letter, and get to that very quickly. This is from Lorraine Tarbox in Coventry, and she included a picture that we'll get to in a minute. She writes, "Hi, Mark. My husband, Walt, and I watch you every chance we can when you're on across the fence." You don't mind us saying that. Yep. The Tarboxes love to watch the birds, feed them generously, and they say they derive a lot of pleasure. We usually know what kind of birds come to feed, but recently we've had one that has us stumped. It's been coming around on and off for a couple of weeks. It's a ground feeder, seems to be a loner. What can you tell the folks up in Coventry about what they sent in?
Well, this is a really interesting species that they had, and they sent me this picture, and this is a rusty blackbird. And oftentimes, we see the red-winged blackbird here, which is a real common species. This is a species that's declining rapidly. And so there's actually a blitz out for people to try to collect as much data. And if people are interested in that, they can go to rustyblackbird.org and find out more information as to how they can participate.
And we're running out of time, so they could also contact you. We'll put that information up. You can write to Mark with questions, 255 Sherman Hollow Road in Huntington. And in this day and age, most people prefer the email. That's mlabarr@audubon.org. We didn't have enough time today. Thanks very much for coming in. Always appreciate it.
Well, it's always great to be here.
That is our program for today. We know you have choices, so thanks for choosing us. I'm Will Michael, inviting you to join us back here each weekday afternoon for another visit Across the Fence.